On today's podcast, I have my guest, Keri Cohen, who is a very dear friend of mine, who was a former colleague in my embodiment teaching days. She's now a licensed marriage and family therapist who has an incredible story to tell you. From being born to a single mother with addiction issues to having an over 10-year struggle with infertility to a very public divorce with celebrity figures involved, and now being married and about to actually have her miracle baby. There's a lot in this episode you don't want to miss. Tune in. Are you ready for a wild ride? I'm Alexis Artin, and I invite you to strap in because this is more than a podcast. This is Look at Me Now. Hey. Hi, everybody. Today, I feel like I say this every time, but I'm really excited about today's podcast guest because the theme of this first season, if you haven't been able to gather this, is having people that are really important to me in my life as my guests. And today is no exception. Today I have my friend who I've known for a long time as Keri D'Angelo, but now she is Keri Cohen. Oh. And she is a licensed marriage and family therapist. But formerly, I knew her as a co-teacher in the female embodiment space. So you can tell already that we've come a long way. There's a journey to be discussed here. So I'm going to welcome her to Look at Me Now. Hi, honey.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, there's not a big pink elephant in the room, but there is a little girl baby in that belly that will be getting a big pink elephant when she comes along very soon. Keri is 9 months pregnant as we speak. We could go into labor at any time, and that would make this a really magical podcast episode. But she'll keep us posted if anything, if any news breaks or water breaks, I should say. Anyway, hi, baby. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, as you know, as we've discussed on this podcast, we do a look back at the past, then we look at the present, and then we look at the future. And in your particular case, I find your story, the reason that I asked you to be here today is because I find your story particularly so inspiring. And I say that because not that we don't all have challenges throughout our lives, but you've had really significant ones all along the way that have marked your path. And I just see you as someone who is so not only resilient, but somebody who is able to position herself to find the perspective of, I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to better myself from this. I'm going to do this with a sense of joy and purpose and intention. And it is one of the things that I've always loved about you, and I marvel at you. And I think your story is going to be so valuable for our guests to see themselves in. Like, wow, we're all on this journey together of inspiring one another. And so let's begin by going back and looking at your origin story. So can you tell everybody a little bit about from whence you came?
I was born to a single mother. I didn't know my father ever growing up. Until about actually through Ancestry DNA. Like 3 or 4 years ago, I found him, or he had passed. But I never knew my story or kind of half of who I was. And then on top of that, my mother was severely mentally ill and suffered from drug and alcohol abuse. So needless to say, it was not the picture perfect childhood growing up. But I think, thinking back, I never wanted to be different, right? So like I would go to school and I would kind of mask what was happening at home because I think from a young age, I never wanted to be the victim. I never wanted to be looked at differently, or, oh, poor her, she, single mom, or mom is abusive emotionally, and all of these things. So I just kind of put on this face when I would go to school so I could fit in and assimilate and not be treated any differently, which I think was helpful, right?
Yeah. I think that we all, and it's a running theme, right? Mm-hmm. That we all are looking for safety. We all are looking for love. We're all looking not just to survive, but to thrive in our environments. And when we feel like we're not set up for success, we come up with strategies. How am I going to cope with this? How am I going to deal with this? How am I going to adapt so that I can get where I want to go?
Yeah.
Whether that is just to basic safety or whether that is, to go after my wildest dreams.
Yeah. And, later on, I had a therapist tell me that as a child, it was equivalent of being in a war zone. And when you're in a war zone, you can't stop and grieve or feel sad or upset. You just have to keep foot in front of another and keep going. And then when the war is over, you can process and grieve what happened. So I think in my childhood, it served me in a way, right? So it served me because I learned how to compartmentalize and move forward, but then at other points it didn't serve me, and those are things I kind of had to learn.
So talk about some of those ways, the ways in which it didn't serve you.
I mean, just pushing everything down and not coping or dealing with stuff or facing things. It didn't serve me that way. But when you need to get stuff done and move forward, it serves.
And what was the cost to you of that stuffing, of that holding?
I think it brings me to my marriage. I think that I got married very, very young. So I was holding a lot that I brought into that marriage. Right? So
let's talk about your marriage. Where did you meet your husband?
At a bar.
At a bar.
At a college bar.
What a unique story.
Yeah.
I
was in college. I was in college
when
I met him, and he had graduated and was playing professional football.
Okay.
And that's how we met.
Okay. And for anybody who doesn't know, Keri is pregnant, but she is not pregnant from that marriage. She's pregnant from her second marriage. Yes. So let's go back in time to that first marriage. And you're saying you're like bringing all of this, people like to use the term baggage, right? You're bringing all this baggage into this relationship. So tell me what effect that had, if any, on that relationship. Tell us about how that relationship played out for you.
Well, there's several things. I was too young. I wasn't ready. And I didn't know myself. And I didn't know that the childhood I had gave me an excellent blueprint for what not to do and what I didn't want. I didn't realize that at the time, But my mother really and my family, how they live their life, kind of gave me this really great, don't do that. Like you shouldn't do that.
Right. Right.
And so that was the positive of that. But then coming to the marriage, I think I had a lot of sadness and almost like really high expectations that my partner is going to like parent me. Right. And
deep thoughts. Yes. Yes.
And give me all the love and be the unconditional parent that I never had. And he did the best he could, right? He was a great partner and all those things. I just didn't know myself, and I didn't have a sense of identity. And being with someone that had such a big identity and purpose in life, I felt kind of in the shadows and like I didn't know myself and I didn't have identity. And then being married to an NFL player just has its own set of stuff.
Sure.
You're kind of thrust into this life of adulthood very quickly with a lot of money, at 22, 23 years old, and you're still kind of,
You hadn't grown up with money, considering your
no.
mother's addiction and
No.
substance abuse and all of those things.
At one point we had been on like food stamps, and we had been kicked out of apartments, and
It's total culture shock. I mean, it is
Yeah.
sort of a rags to riches.
yeah. I remember the first time my mom never owned a home, and my husband and I owned a home, and I remember that was like such a big deal.
And I love that you call out first that you were so young, you didn't even know who you were, let alone who the right person for you would be if you don't know who you are. And that you call in someone who is really certain about who they are, at least on the outside, right? They know who they are. They know what they want. They're doing it in a really big way. And they're super certain. And I'm really uncertain. And I operate from a place of uncertainty. So I've attached myself to this person who has a lot of certainty because maybe it'll give me the certainty that I've been missing. Whether that's the certainty that I'm loved, whether that's the certainty that I'm safe, whether that's the certainty that I'm worthy, whatever it may be.
Self-worth. That was a big one too.
Yeah.
It was a feeling of I'm worth something because I'm attached to this person, which felt false to me. But in that marriage, I mean, we were together, I think 8-9 years, something like that. I grew so much, and it was a big spiritual awakening. He was like one of my biggest teachers, and we had found this mentor in San Francisco, and she was based on Course in Miracles, and both of us started kind of learning a lot from her. And the marriage was a restorative experience for my childhood, because there was a lot of that safety and containment there.
Yeah.
But
well, isn't that so interesting? Because there's a lot of safety and there's a lot of certainty until there isn't, because that marriage came to an end somehow.
Yeah.
So tell me about how that marriage not only came to an end, but how did you, in terms of the through line that you're speaking of, I had this certainty and I had this safety, and I'd finally come into that after so much of not having it. But part of it didn't even feel authentic to me, but part of it did and was reparative. But then there's the rupture of now we're not in this relationship anymore. So how did you fare with that, given and then we'll get into like how the divorce took place. But
I mean, I think if there was like talking about like the unresolved wounds from my childhood, I think there was like some element of sabotage for myself, right? And my feelings of, just not being comfortable in something that's healthy. Because I wasn't in
who can't relate to that? Yeah.
So when there's like a healthy relationship, it's, peace and calm chaos feels more at home.
Sure.
Right. And that was one of the things I learned. And I'm not saying it was anyone's fault ultimately. I think we had just outgrown each other, have gone as far. And I used to think, maybe if I met him older when I had evolved, and, it's not that he wasn't the right person. It's just
Maybe it wasn't the right timing.
Was terrible.
But the timing wasn't, because as you know, everything is divine, and you've learned and gained so much and all of those things. But, it sort of goes back to the idea in attachment theory of, we're looking for familiarity. We're not necessarily looking for comfort. People think like, oh, I'm going to attach to something that feels safe and something that feels comfortable and something that feels abundant and loving and all of these things. But what actually attracts us is what's familiar. Yeah. And if chaos and discomfort is familiar, that's what we're going to go towards. Yeah. And it's fascinating that you actually went for the comfort and you went for the safety. You didn't necessarily go for the familiar, but in the end, it came back to get you, because it wasn't the familiar chaos. And so it became familiar chaos by way of sabotaging the marriage. Yeah. So let's talk about the end of the marriage. What happened there?
Well, I don't know. It was a long separation time. There was a lot of back and forth and separating and not separating and moving in and moving out. And things like that, because it's so hard to end a marriage.
How long were you guys together?
It's
a long time, because you met in college.
Years. Yeah.
Yeah.
8 or 9 years, something like that.
And you had been married how long?
5 years. We were married for 5 years.
And you were trying for children at the time?
A little bit. You know, he really wanted children right away. I had my own hangups around children. Like, I was kind of like, I still feel like a child. Given my upbringing, am I going to be a good mother? Do I know? I didn't really have the best blueprint. So I wanted to, and I feel like I still had that gnawing feeling of like, what's my purpose? I don't know myself, and I kind of want to have that set in place before I was really conscious about bringing a child into the world and how to do that. And a lot of NFL, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but a lot of wives are like bored. So they're like, oh, I'm going to have a baby. And I'm like, I don't want to have a baby because I'm bored.
Yes. I mean, that tracks. That tracks. We're all looking for purpose. Yeah. We're all looking for fulfillment, and everybody is going to, look for vehicles for that.
Yeah.
And so often, the rub is that people are looking for it outside of themselves. They're looking for that thing that is going to fulfill them.
Yeah.
A la, you thought, oh, well, this marriage will fill in me the uncertainty or the lack of worth that I have, by attaching myself to something outside of myself that carries that. Maybe then I can have a piece of that. But really,
I don't know if I thought that consciously.
Maybe not consciously,
you know what I
right?
mean?
And I don't. And again, like those wives, I don't even think consciously they thought, oh, I'm going to have a baby because I'm bored.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just this almost instinctive, impulsive. I'm going to reach out for that drink. I'm going to reach out for that food. I'm going to reach out for that relationship. I'm going to reach out for whatever it may be to have a child, because it is going to fulfill in me something that feels like a void, rather than realizing that nothing is actually void. It is, just the work of going inward and acknowledging where that belief is actually coming from, and recognizing that we're whole and we're complete, and everything else is icing on the cake, right? But all this to say, so you were like, I'm actually really consciously aware, because of one of the gifts of your upbringing, right, is I'm going to be really conscious and really intentional and really aware about making really big life choices, because I've seen what can happen. And that is a gift that you carried over from, your childhood, that maybe other people who had a little bit more privilege, let's say, wouldn't even think twice about. And so you were cautious about wanting children, and you've had a really interesting fertility journey, which is why I fold the children piece into this.
That could be a whole podcast.
Well, we're gonna get there. We are getting there, girlfriend. So the marriage. What was the kind of final straw of the marriage coming to a close, do you think?
I don't see the ending of relationships ever as a final straw. I think that there's these little tiny paper cuts that continue to happen. And it's just like...
And before you know it, the rope has been cut.
It's unraveled.
Yeah.
And it's
a really great way of saying it.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah. Absolutely. That makes total sense.
I mean, I think that the point of no return was we were separated. There were points when I think he wanted the marriage to work and I didn't, and then points and vice versa, and it would flip around.
Yeah.
And then there came a point where he met somebody that was a huge, huge public figure, and there was no going back. It was just done at that point,
Do you want to name that public figure? Or do you prefer to keep it under wraps? It's your decision.
I don't know. I'm so torn because I've never named her or talked about it publicly. I've always never wanted to be known for it. I mean, but look, if anyone Googles my name at this point, they're going to know. So I guess I could say who it was, but it was, is Jessica Simpson. And so that happened, and then they developed a relationship, and it was just off to the races, and it was just bananas. at that time.
The one question that I actually really want to ask you, and I'm sure is on everybody's mind, and I don't want to linger on this because it's just one small piece of a more important story, which is the full story of what an inspiration I think you are. But here this happens where you are sort of in this, for a very short period of time at least, this love triangle with, here you are, the average girl, the girl next door. And you are in a love triangle with, your husband, who's this professional NFL player, and, a megastar. And in essence, when the death by 1,000 paper cuts, has this ending, right? In that way, what did that do to you?
Well, there's a few things. So the ending of our divorce was never contentious. There was not any fighting or, and it was an odd ending because even on our anniversaries, we were still spending them together and we were close friends and things like that. But the celebrity element just made it, and another woman and another energy, right? So he, went and decided to start a relationship with her. And this is pre-Instagram era.
Right.
Facebook, sure, but
right.
So there was this sense of the whole world knows my business now.
Paparazzi following you, sure.
Follow me, stalking me, getting so many offers to be on shows, tell my story, all these things. And the sense of it was in my face nonstop. Because this is before Instagram where,
right.
If you didn't want to know about someone's life, you didn't have to know about their life. You break up with someone, if you don't want to hear about them ever again or who they're with, you do not have to.
Yeah, right.
And so, I would
What a concept.
I would be traveling and my soon-to-be ex-husband would be on the cover of Us or People, because this is when those magazines were huge and they were everywhere. And so they would be at the nail salon, the hair salon, the airport, just in my face.
Yes.
And I couldn't escape it, Also,
and what does that do to your heart? What does that do to your mind? Again, here you are, just the quote unquote average girl. Not that we want to fall into comparisons, but so many do. What do you do? Because there are so many people that are listening to this that are like, wow, I've been left for another woman. I can't imagine what it would be like to be left for a mega star. What does that do? And how were you resilient around that? Because you really were.
It was hard. It was a dark time. Yeah. It was a dark time because I also wanted to grieve the ending of my marriage in private.
Yeah.
And I would get, harassed. I would have people showing up at my door. I would have phone calls from my wedding photographer saying, they offered me 10 grand if I can put your wedding pictures in Us, and will you sign a form, allowing me to do it. And then, just people that I never talked to in high school trying to call me and be friends with me, or new people in LA trying to somehow, want to be around that kind of energy,
energy, high profile. Yeah.
Yeah. And feeling kind of who can I trust and who are my friends? And
yeah,
it was tough.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And moving past that, what do you really credit in terms of coming out of that? Coming out of all of that drama, and what was the next phase for you?
So I was blessed to have that mentor in San Francisco and therapy. And that's when I really realized okay, wow, therapy is what I need.
What a gift. Yeah, There's this thing called therapy. What a gift. Who knew?
And it's what are the soul lessons?
Right.
So my philosophy has always been okay, through this, what this experience is here for me to grow, for my spiritual soul development. what is the lesson I need to learn from this? What is trying to present itself? How can I grow from this in this darkness? And sometimes it takes years to find those answers.
Absolutely.
Right? Sometimes we don't find them right away.
Yeah.
And we don't see them for so far down the road.
Maybe until
But
never.
I knew I didn't want to be defined by that.
Yeah.
Because it was another one of those experiences of, this isn't about me. Like, I don't want to be known for this. So I try to like lie low, grieve, and just move forward and focus on myself. Right? So that message kept coming back. Like, focus on you. What do you want? What is your purpose?
Time out there. Everybody out there, hear this. Hear this, because that is such a message to the masses, right? Like your mess becoming your message. Focus on you. It's so simple and yet so profound. And for you, it really was the way out and through to who I see you to be now, living your best life. So just wanted to like really highlight that for a minute, because I feel like that is such a profound message that can get lost sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you called that out.
And another one was, don't wallow in it. You know, I had a really good friend at the time take me to dinner, and he's like, okay, you get a year. You get a year to like be a mess. Be a mess.
Fall apart at the seams.
Fall apart.
Yeah.
But then after that, you can't be bitter. You've got to move forward. You've got to just pick yourself up and keep going and be optimistic. And I did. And that was great advice at the time. One of the great advices I got.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is something about that, like the cognitive dissonance, right? Of being able to hold both. Not doing a spiritual bypass and not wallowing too much, but finding that balance of, I get to have my feelings about this.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm not going to give it so much power that I lose myself in the shadow of this and not go to the light that is also there for me. Go to the possibilities that live in this. See the gifts that are present in this. So I think in a world of divine friendships, that was one for you. So that's really beautiful.
And it's like the people I met along the way that have supported and held me up are really important. And it's defining your story.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like the story you tell yourself is so important.
Now we can see why she's a therapist. Okay, there it is. Yeah.
It's like the story you tell yourself around what has happened to you.
That's it. I mean, everything comes down to your perspective and the stories that you tell yourself. What are you inserting or asserting is what's really going on here. And is that the truth? Are you telling yourself a lie? And I mean, our brains are always going to lie to us. As we know, our bodies cannot lie to us. Our soul is not going to lie to us, but our brains will lie all day. So what lie are you believing, right? Or maybe you just need to tell a better lie. Or better yet, maybe you look deeper for the truth.
Well, not even truth or lie. It's the... like go back to my childhood, for instance. It's the story I could have lived with that is, I came from, no money, no one in my family had education. I was so disadvantaged. I was the victim. I was emotionally abused. I was this, and woe is me, and this is terrible. Or it's the story that's empowering. That is, I learned from this. I grew, I knew what not to do. That story.
It's both sides.
And I'm strong because of it,
Yes. It's both sides. Both are true, right? You did go through a hardship, so to speak, and there were gifts in that hardship that, serve a really valuable purpose, not just in your life, but in all the lives that you now help now that you're a therapist. Yeah. It is, to me, the universal language of everything being in balance, right? It's both. Okay, so now let's move into the next chapter of things. What happens at this point? So we are through the divorce, we are through the year of letting ourselves be a mess, and what comes next?
So at the time I was working for Rachel Zoe, who was a stylist. Maybe before that, I broke my leg, and I just wanted to change career paths because I've been doing so much therapy, and I was like, maybe this is what I want to explore. I want to be a therapist because I see the changes it's made in me. So I decided to go back to school, eventually got in another relationship, which did not work out. And at that time, I decided to freeze my eggs at the end of this relationship because I was in my mid 30s. Mm-hmm. So I had clarity and certainty that I wanted to be a mom. And at that point in my mid 30s, I felt prepared to be a mom and ready, and I was spiritually developed to be a mom. So I'm gonna go freeze my eggs. It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be great. So fun.
Yeah, I'm so proactive.
Yeah.
Did that.
But God bless that we have that option now. I mean,
and also with the fertility world, there's this false sense of if you freeze your eggs, this is a guarantee. That this will work.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
If anybody ever plays that game, that card game, I call bullshit. Yes,
but I had that sense. I had that sense of, okay, I have 20 frozen eggs. Like, I'm great. I'm golden. I can take my time. I can breathe. I can, date around. And in a sense, it was great because it allowed me, I didn't have that feeling of desperation on dates of like, oh, I have to like get pregnant right now yesterday because my eggs are dying.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I had some dates with men that are like, oh, you're 35 or 36. Like, you must be dying to get married. You need to have kids. And I'm like, actually, I don't. I'm good. I have frozen eggs. Little did I know that are not guaranteed. But it served me. Like, it gave me that false sense of security.
Sure.
So, so fast forward however many years later, I met someone. He had a benign tumor that affected his sperm, and I knew he really wanted to have kids, and so the doctor had told him like, you should start doing IVF. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, we didn't touch my frozen eggs. We did a round, and it just ended up not working and taking. And then I found out I had some like scar tissue in my uterus. I had it removed. We ended up naturally getting pregnant, and I carried till about 10 weeks, and the heartbeat stopped. And it was a really traumatic, horrible, horrible event. I will never forget being in that doctor's office and her not finding a heartbeat. And it's called a missed miscarriage. And I didn't even know that was a thing in my mind because I've had some miscarriages before. And in my mind, I was like, oh, you're going to bleed or this. And it's like the fetus is in there. There's just no heartbeat. And I just fell apart, was devastated, and ended up they had to remove the baby through a D&C procedure.
Sure.
Which is really traumatizing.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, that relationship, that had taken a toll. Fertility had taken a toll. We were also long distance. It just wasn't meant to be. And looking back now, I'm glad that relationship, because that really wasn't the right relationship for me. But when you're in it and all of these things are happening, it's hard to see that. But
it's hard to get that 30,000 foot perspective, that bird's eye view on things. Yeah.
And like, as hard as that was to go through, I'm glad that I never got, pregnant. It just wasn't for both of us. We were
divine intervention on that.
Yeah. The right partners. So then that happens. I decide to freeze at some point another batch of eggs. COVID happens. I'm now 40, and my fertility doctor is just like, your egg quality doesn't seem that great. You can't freeze any more eggs. You should freeze donor eggs and that. Or not donor eggs, my eggs with donor sperm, because they want you to freeze embryos. This could be a whole.
Sure.
So I did that during COVID, and I kind of, was like, I may not meet someone. I might have to be a single mom at some point. So then I started, I had gone to Tony Robbins, a couple of his retreats right before COVID, and that was super helpful. And I was just like, I have to the blueprint of my life of what I thought it was going to be is not matching my blueprint. And in order to be happy, I have to create a new blueprint. Because if I'm attached to this old white picket fence,
Fantasy.
not even a fantasy, it's like a white picket fence husband, that's what my blueprint was. I wanted to get married and wanted to have kids. And that just wasn't in my control. It was COVID. You know, I'm turning 40, my eggs are dying. It's all these things, right?
Yeah.
It's just not happening. So I knew I had to create a different blueprint. So the new blueprint was like, okay, I would like to have all these things, but if I can't, I'm going to be happy as a single mom, right? I'm going to set myself up with a career and a place to live and a support system until I eventually, it's just not going to look the way I thought it was going to look. So I got into that place of acceptance, right? Of this is out of my control and I have to accept what is. And so that happened. Then I did meet my amazing husband.
I mean, as it does, as soon as you surrender, as soon as you let go and stop trying to arm wrestle the universe and say, I'm going to win this. And you just go, okay, use me how you will use me. Then all of a sudden, there it is.
Yeah. And
Not an uncommon tale.
But it's so hard to do because so many
It
people.
is so hard to do.
So many people are like, oh, it's going to work out. And, you know, it's just.
Yeah.
When
No,
you
it really is
looking,
a full spiritual surrender.
When you stop looking, they'll find. And I used to be like, oh my God, shut up.
I know.
Like, shut up.
I totally hear you. And it's like, what does that even mean? And it's not surrender like give up, but it's surrender like let go. And it is. It's a very hard concept to materialize, right? In terms of like, well, what are the steps to that?
Yeah.
But there is, nevertheless, I can't tell you how many times I hear the story of as soon as I surrendered, as soon as I let go, and for everybody it looks different. What that looks like, how that manifested. But it does seem to hold a lot of water.
Yeah.
You know, because really, I mean, now here you are. It's like all of the striving for this. And now here it's landed in your lap. You've got this beautiful marriage to this wonderful, incredible man. You've got this beautiful baby that is going to be here any minute now. And, you know, everything that has transpired, whether that be in the relationship space or the fertility space or, you know, the idea of being a mother, any of those things, there has been such a journey of one piece coming into the puzzle and then another piece coming into the puzzle. And then this piece, we thought it was a fit. It's not. It actually belongs in a different puzzle. But it's like you never made any of the puzzle pieces wrong for not being the right fit at the right time.
Yeah.
And then the whole picture came into place and it's such a beautiful picture.
Yeah. And I mean, the fertility story doesn't end there. It's like, you know, we got together and then right after we got married, we unfroze all of my eggs and they all died.
Yeah.
They all died. And the devastation that, you know, financially, the whole thing, the doctors or the lab called me and they're like, oh, you froze your eggs 9 years ago when you were a pioneer of egg freezing. The egg freezing isn't what it is today.
Right.
You know, and so it was why. And then we frantically started meeting with all these doctors because I thought I had done the right thing and froze these eggs. And doctors were telling us, you know, I'm in my early 40s now or early, I think I was 42. They're all saying to me, oh, you're too old now. You know, just get a donor egg. Like you're not going to be able to have your own biological children, which is something I so desperately, being an only child and not having a ton of family or knowing family, I really wanted this biological piece. And so that was so devastating. But we found a doctor eventually that believed in me and us, and I held out hope and I was cautiously optimistic, but also the surrender of, okay, if this doesn't work, what is my new blueprint? And my husband and I had so many conversations around that. Are we going to now have 6 dogs? Are we going to adopt? Are we going to be the couple that travels? Are we going to do a donor? What does that look like? And having to step into, okay, this might be the reality that I need to accept. Right. And we had done another round of IVF with no results. We came back. I think I had like a crazy amount of eggs, like 35 eggs, and none of them were normal. And then we did another round, which resulted in this one normal embryo. And if you know anything about fertility, it's 50-50 every time you do a transfer.
Mm-hmm. I had my second by IVF. Yep. And yeah. And that's why they encourage you to put more than one egg in or embryo in if you can have it. Mm-hmm. And I did have more than one, but I wasn't willing to risk having twins at that point. So I said, I'm going to press my luck and just put in one. And I did get my second child out of IVF. But yeah, everything is a risk, and you're playing God in a lot of ways. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, IVF is like a whole thing, you know, the things people say to you on that route and on that journey, and the places of despair. Because I actually, in my private practice, I have a lot of IVF women, and it's just like that sense of hopelessness and darkness and despair.
And desperation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is
a dark time. And
it is.
Throw in a pound of hormones on top of that. And it's a party.
Oh my God, you said it. Oh man. I mean, and the level of self-advocacy that you have to have. I mean, in the medical field in general, I mean, I feel like I need a whole second podcast just to focus on the level of self-advocacy that people need around medical health, mental health, well-being, all of those things. But the fact that you were like, no, I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to find the person who believes in me. I'm going to find the person who's going to see this through with me. I'm not just taking one person's opinion or niche of medical expertise as what's possible for me, as, you know, the order of what my life is going to turn out to be. So bravo to you for being somebody that continued to push for her worth and her value and what was possible for her.
Yeah. And I think it's a sense of, my husband would always be like, there's an end to this. So we're gonna know at some point whether this happens. And that feeling of clarity of kind of like, okay, either this is working for us or it's not, but it's that in-between space that is so hard for a lot of people. And I think in my life, there's been so many unknowns and in-betweens. It's like that moment when you're flying, trapeze artists, right? You're flying and you let go. And there's that 1 second of space where you're just free flying before you grab onto something. And that's the scariest space. And that's the hardest place.
And that's the space where trust lives. Mm-hmm. That's the space where faith lives. Mm-hmm. And
faith.
And
great word.
Yeah. And it's not always easy when you're in that really dark place.
Yeah.
To have trust or to have faith, particularly in yourself.
Yes.
Right? Which is where you really need it the most. And my coach always says it this way, which I love. She says, you know, sometimes when one door closes, the other door doesn't open right away, and it's a bitch in the hallway.
Yeah, it is. The hallway is the worst.
The hallway is a bitch. I say that all the time. I'm like, want to make T-shirts that say it's a bitch in the hallway.
Yeah.
Because it is. And there are so many of those gray spaces in our lives where we want things to be black and white because that feels certain to us. But living in that space, again, of uncertainty is excruciating sometimes, just really excruciating.
Yeah. And when it is not in your own timing.
Right.
Right? And sometimes
and not on your blueprint.
And when it's also not in your own timing, you feel like this may never happen.
Yeah.
You can get in that headspace of, well, this is not my time. I mean, from my divorce until now was almost at the end, 14 years. You know, that's not my ideal. That wasn't but it all worked out.
It all worked out.
But you have to believe.
You do.
You know, and just keep moving forward.
Which you've done. I mean, you've since become this licensed marriage and family therapist, which is no wonder, all things considered, with the story that you've told. You are in this beautiful marriage. You have this beautiful baby on the way. So I feel like we've taken this incredible journey. And of course, we could do like 800 more of these conversations to get into the nitty gritty details. But I want to gear now into looking at the future, which is, I ask people the same question at the end of every podcast episode.
Which I don't know what it is.
I'm excited that you don't know what it is. So I ask everybody, like, in keeping with the framework of this podcast, right? This being, look at me now. The idea being that we are removing the external gaze, right? We are removing all of the expectations and the shoulds and all of those things as any measurement or any metric of our worth and our value, right? And instead, we're turning the gaze inward. We're holding up a mirror to ourselves to say, look at me now. It's not this external, look at me now, look at how far I've come, look what I've accomplished, and presenting as anything. It is a, wow, when I'm alone with myself, when I look in the mirror and I am present with the truth of who I am, what do I see? What do I want to acknowledge about myself? What do I want to validate about myself? What do I most want myself to know is true? What needs to be remembered? And so I'm going to invite you, as if I was actually, and I swear next season I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring in an actual mirror so that we could do the real thing. But I want you to imagine that you have a mirror in front of you and you are gazing at the Keri that you are today, which carries with it all the Keris that you've been, that we've talked about this whole time. You are all of those women at all of those ages, through all of those experiences, here in this present moment, looking in that mirror. What is it that you say to that reflection? What's true? And what do you want to declare so the future can hear you?
And that I'm enough. All by myself. And that I can do it, and that I'm responsible for me and the choices I make, and I'm grateful for all the challenges, all the pain, all the heartbreak, because they really allowed me to develop my soul in a way that needed to be healed, right?
Yeah.
And also, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's greener on the side you water it. And gratitude.
Yeah.
Which is so easy, I think. Sorry, I'm digressing now. But it's so easy when you are on the other side to say, oh, gratitude.
Right. It's going back to that idea of like, don't do the spiritual bypass, right?
Yeah.
It's like gratitude is there and it's available, but I really believe that gratitude is the synthesis of looking at all parts being equal. It is looking at, there is light and there is shadow, and they are equal. And when I look at them both as equal to make the whole experience of who I am, then I have gratitude because I see that it all had a purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the gratitude lives. That's where unconditional love lives.
Yeah.
Is in the synthesis of these equal and opposite parts. And
even gratitude in your darkest times. I mean, that was another lesson I learned. It's like when I was in my darkest places and alone, and I would just have gratitude for my bed or running water, that I had running water, that I'm not in a war-torn country, that I at least my basic needs are being met.
Yeah. I think that that's a really great takeaway. I know that I actually just talked about this on a prior episode with my girlfriends, that in my darkest time, it was a woman who called me out for not having enough gratitude. Was a woman that like really she was the catalyst for the greatest pivot of my life, from going from like suicidal to where I am now, which is, being a coach and being somebody, speaking about empowerment rather than playing the victim. And she was the one who called me out on my victim mentality and said that what I really needed was gratitude, and suggested a gratitude exercise of just writing down, 3 to 5 of the simplest things that you're grateful for every day. And it could be as little as my coffee is warm, right? That I'm so grateful I have a roof over my head. I'm so grateful for that friend who, hugged me today, whatever it is, right? All the way to the big things, but oftentimes it's the little things, right? That really help us narrow in and get that real energetic vibration and sensation, embodied sensation of, oh yeah, I feel that gratitude. Yeah. It's not just an idea of gratitude. It's like this embodied sensation of, wow, I can bring a tear to my eye. I'm so grateful for this warm bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then bringing it back to today in the future, it's, the gratitude I have for the husband I have, the life I have, and the divine timing of everything. Because for him, I feel like I'm the best wife for him now, because of what I've gone through in my previous marriage and things like that. It's allowed me now to grow, develop, to hopefully be the best mom because of all the things I've gone through. I think back, if I had had a baby in my 20s, I wouldn't be so grateful to have a child. I wouldn't, when I get sick during pregnancy, I think in my 20s, I would have been like, oh my God, this is annoying. And, and now I'm grateful. I'm like, oh, my baby's kicking and it hurts, but I'm grateful that I'm pregnant. It's just such a different experience.
Yeah, it's the fruit is so much sweeter when you've been the one to nurture and to grow it and to, bring it to its full state of ripeness.
And being forced to wait in the hallway.
That bitch of a hallway.
Good for me because it's brought me to where I am spiritually and allowed me to show up in a different way in my life.
Yes.
Because of that.
And it's going to make you an even better mama.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get your baby a onesie that says, "It's a bitch in the hallway."
Yes, please do.
Because I actually can't wait to be that auntie that gives her that onesie.
Yes.
I can't thank you enough for being here. And I really want to acknowledge that, in a lot of ways, the woman that I sit in awe of when I sit across from you is the woman that grows from I've got to hide and just keep my head down and not accept a gazillion dollars to talk about my story, to a woman that's sitting across from me and telling her full story without needing to cage any of it, and not because you're getting anything for it, in air quotes, but because it's your story and it's worthy of being told for you.
I appreciate that.
And so I'm really grateful and I'm really honored that you shared it here. And I love you so much.
I love you too.
And we're gonna go to dinner now. We're gonna feed that belly. So we're signing off for now. This episode of Look at Me Now. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you, my love.
Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all. Join us for Look at Me Now wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to share, like, and subscribe.